subconscious efforts. We're here today to speak about transparency. We're here today to speak about transparency. We have a wonderful panel with us, and I'm going to start by doing their introduction, asking them a few questions, and then I'm going to open it up to all of you. We have with us Anju Modi, over 30 years experience in the business. She is someone who has always spoken about crafts, and what I really admire about her is she gets her hands dirty. She travels around India, she goes to the craft clusters, and she really, really tries to understand what is going on the ground level. She's done many interventions. One of her most famous is the development of a luxury yarn for Chanderi silk. She's also known for her couture and bridal pieces, but she's also an award-winning costume designer, having worked very closely with Sanjay Leela Bansali, and she's won a Filmfare Award. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
Rakesh Taco probably needs no introduction. He's been around again, 30 years plus. He is the co-founder and director of the label Abraham and Thakore, one of the first labels to talk about craft traditions at a time when all designers were talking about embellishments. They were talking about textiles and weaves, and really were important in educating the market on them. They have been a driving force, taking a more minimalist approach to fashion. They're about quiet elegance. They are the craft modernizers. One of their pieces is now at the V&A Museum. It's a double ikat houndstooth piece that was part of their 2011 collection. Then we have Amit Agarwal, trained with Tarun Tehlani, the NIFT graduate, founded two labels, Amit and Amit Agarwal. Amit is one of the first designers to talk about the relationship between technology and sustainability and tradition. He uses industrial materials, even turning waste to create weaves. And one of his landmark collections in 2012 used unused pieces of patola weaves. Amit is a new age couturier. And joining us, very last minute, and thank you for that, is Urvashi Kaur. She is a graduate of ESMOD Paris, someone who's always believed in seasonless clothes. Her clothes are always trans-seasonal. She's also someone who is very much about craft. Her label is contemporary, and she has been part of all the fashion weeks. And one thing about her is that she works in many, many markets abroad. I think you're available even in markets like Greece, correct?
Yes.
So we are here to discuss transparency. A few weeks ago, the Wall Street Journal wrote a piece, "What does it mean to be a transparent brand?" It's something that everyone is talking about right now. Fashion as an industry has tended to be opaque. They like to be secretive. But now we need to be transparent. That is the only way we can know about business practices and whether they are ethical. I think we've all been reading about the cotton crisis in China, so that's only happened because of transparency. From Hermes disclosing its lab-grown mushroom techniques, to the VF Corporation's plan to tell us all about the 100 key suppliers that they have by the end of this year, consumers are now asking for transparency. New age brands are talking about transparencies because it is part of their storytelling. And new technology means through a simple app, we can find out who made our clothes. So my first question is to Anju. You've always focused on indigenous craft and natural textiles, and you've always spoken about the employment in craft clusters. Can we really separate the ethical from the sustainable?
Well, according to me, ethical is sustainable. I mean, if you are sustainable, you are bound to be ethical. So I don't see any kind of separation between them. And it comes naturally to a person, like I can talk about myself, that when I go and kind of work with the artisans and I've learned from them. I have traveled all over from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, and I stayed with the artisans in their homes. So you see, like, you just subconsciously absorb so many of their culture, their values and everything, and then you connect with them. So all these learnings, I take them as my teachers and my gurus. So somehow you respect them, you understand their, detailed patient working of those 200 hours spending on that painstakingly, doing the tie and dye or the kind of the chicken curry or any kind of craft, the weaving, the jamdanis, the shikarga. So you are in awe of them. So somehow I don't think one can become unethical about things, and you want to present that part of our country's heritage to the world in whichever manner I can do it, with my touch of my aesthetics to it, and a bit of contemporizing it for the modern woman, of course, so that it sells. So I believe in the whole cycle of completing the creating a design, reviving, researching, and then presenting it to the world, and then selling, and then going back to the like the way you kind of happens in nature. How it happens, like, okay, the rain happens and it evaporates and just goes into thin air and then comes again. So it's kind of a cycle. So sustainability, ethnic, and in the middle of everything, I think the transparency is also there, because it comes from within. If you are transparent yourself, you are not manipulating anything.
Yes.
So everything is like straightforward for me.
Rakesh is again someone who's been in the industry so many years and also always talked about craft. Have you seen it changing? Because you were one of the first people to talk about your processes and disclose your processes. Have you seen that younger brands now are more transparent and now happy to talk about how their clothes are made?
I think it's true, actually, because when you see the change in the new generation in terms of adapting techniques in the field of handlooms particularly, and craft, there's a tremendous amount of work that's been done by them.
I think Amit's done a lot of work,
Yeah.
so that sort of naturally leads us on to Amit. Does sustainability in fashion need to evolve from the hand-woven debate? Because in India, it sort of gets stuck in this hand-woven debate, and you've done so much, whether it's using discarded sequins or the whole way you do your garment knitting, it's all technology-driven, yet it's so much about sustainability.
I think, Sujata, the first important thing that I wish to speak about is that though the brand has always been spoken about in the technology space, there is nothing to do with technology when we make our clothes. Everything that we do is completely done by hand, indigenously made. It's all completely transparent with the techniques that we use. It's all on our social media, on our platforms. So I think that it's just the employment or the usage of alternative material or industrial waste that visually makes it look like, okay, it could have been crafted out of a machine. But I think a very important language for me when I started doing what I do was to understand the coexistence of our past and our future to make our present. And I think that's the defining point which makes us what we are today. And though I'm always grateful, and I think if we didn't have history, we wouldn't exist today. So I think history, of course, gave me all the knowledge, but at the same time, how would I imbibe that knowledge and probably take it to the next level was an important aspect for me. So I think that everything, of course, that we do is completely rooted in the traditional techniques, be it Ari, be it Zardozi, be it machine embroidery for that matter, but it's all completely done by hand. Yeah, so I definitely think that...
So that's interesting when you said machine embroidery and done by hand, because there's always this talk that machine embroidery is not handcrafted.
No, so basically there's
the
computer embroidery in the machine which is done by hand is technically, yeah, it's as probably as skillful a craft.
It's as imperfect as
yeah, it is as skillful as using hand on the adda, which is the frame. So I feel that for the brand, the coexistence of both is an important talking point, and that's what we do.
You're all about trans-seasonal, cross-functional, high-quality pieces, Urvashi. And you are proud to say you're a slowed batch manufacturer in all your interviews. Do you feel it's easier for someone who is a small batch creator to be more transparent?
Yes, definitely, because you are creating smaller productions. It is you have a more there's less to speak about. Your interactions with your creators and your co-creators, you can be very transparent about it. You can also raise awareness. I mean, I think in the Indian context, especially for me, it has worked really well because And then with COVID, you know, the further understanding that I actually didn't even know the word till Shefali hadn't coined it for me when she met me 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and she said, you know, I think this is what I see in your work. And I was like, so it was something that it wasn't thought through at that point when I was working, but it was something that came from within me, and my own personality, and having lived a nomadic life as a kid, you know, for me it was all about creating something that was effortless, something that has a longevity to it. And also, as Amit said, that, you know, you do go back to your past, you do go back to what your roots are. And what are our roots? Indian culture is all about wearing what's been passed down. So everything is, you know, the more barik it is, the finer the count, the more intricate the weave, the, you know, and then your grandmothers passed it down to your mothers, and your mothers passed it down to you, and you treasure these, you treasure them because it is part of your heritage, and you want to, and to be able to be a small part of that tradition and be able to not only work with people that have been creating that generationally, and also intervening or creating some form of design development which is as per your own aesthetic and your own voice and personality, but then taking that forward into something that you will see stands the test of time even more longer than you and your own creation. You know, whatever you create, you're leaving it behind for future generations to take forward. Even the the crafts people themselves will embrace that design intervention. And so when you're creating small batches, there's a lot more enjoyment, pleasure, desire, and you then, you know, you are also wasting less, you are creating less. You're, and trans-seasonal means you can move the collections from one season to the next, so you are marketing as something that can last many seasons and can be worn and relevant for long.
When you talk about transparency, how do you manage to be transparent yet not give your trade secrets away? Because for fashion, you know, some of it is secret, right?
Well, that's the beauty of it. When you realize that nothing is yours, nor is nothing is fully original, nor is, I mean, if you're working with, there's so many people's hands that go into creating that one product. It's just that design that is yours. In fact, when I create what I create, using, I mean, so many people's love and little time and effort and their own personality has gone into what that one creation, because they are giving it their own little twist and turns. You know, sometimes you work with the karigars. I mean, I used to do embroideries back in the day, but not anymore. But they'll all give a little twist to it, and they'll all put their little bit to it, or even like a bag. You know, different women from different from the village would all do a little bit of work on the bag and then leave it, and then another woman, when she gets time, would come and work on it, and over a period of years that one bag would get ready, and one woman would give it to her daughter, but collectively people have worked on it. So nothing is yours, it isn't yours. I mean, I remember when I worked first time with weavers from Kota, and I said, you know, I can only give you this much order, I cannot afford to make more pieces for you, and I know that for you to develop this design, there is a cost that goes into it. So would it be okay? Would you be okay to work with me on a design that I would not be able to give you large orders on? And he said, don't worry. We want, you know, they're little entrepreneurs themselves. And he said, I want to embrace your design aesthetic, because they also understand it's like a collaboration, it's like a work that you're working together. It's not about your vision and your twist. Anyone can use those resources a million times and differently. Everyone has their own different take on it and a different, they envision the same thing differently. So it isn't yours to hold on to as a secret. It isn't
but
yours.
equally, if I may, because I think what we have is the luxury of with the weavers,
Yes,
particularly, or
yes,
any
small
craft,
craft.
that you could do smaller numbers,
Yeah,
and that is what
you
it's
can,
all about.
absolutely.
And that's what you sustain with them, and you build that relationship
And so for smaller
through.
businesses to exist
Yeah.
in this framework and to be able to support those small communities that they work with and be able to sustain a smaller setup, a smaller establishment. You don't have to, it's not only about scale and volume. We have to break that cycle. Right. And I think COVID did that. Even for someone like me, I felt you need to break the format. You need to change the way even we were looking at things to be a part of.
Well,
She's given up so much.
well, I took this as a blessing in disguise for me, and I closed down all my stores. I stepped out of that treadmill of commercializations, and I kind of, introspection and reflections on your own thoughts. I said, what am I doing? I'm running every day, and trying to make ends meet, and not being full justice to my own passion for the developments or reinventing the crafts and everything. So that has turned out to be a great step on my part. And I am doing now the young brides and everyone, of course, with the beautiful textiles around, with the contemporary version, the young girls. I'm telling them stories about our past, how we used to weave these tree of life and peacocks and parrots, and what's the story behind, what is the symbol of these, age-old, meaningful value system which we weave into this fabric. So they do understand, and I think I feel little responsible for creating this kind of an awareness and consciousness among the Gen Z, that they should understand what goes behind everything and why so, and then giving it a little modern twist. I mean, that's the way today's things are.
Rakesh, A&T have been in many stores internationally. Is it possible to scale up and be transparent?
I think transparency is very important in fashion, particularly because I think the consumer needs to know where, how, and who's made that product that one buys as such, and also which factory has made it. Do they follow the norms? Do they follow the regulations? Do they actually make sure that the worker gets the right wages and the working environments are good for them, and equally that they can actually sustain the work that they need to continue?
But what about all the marketing? I mean, I know Amit has spoken about this in interviews about the greenwashing and how people just say they're transparent, not for a consumer out here. Yeah. How do we know that the brand is really telling us the truth?
I think it's of course very, very important today to connect not just the maker, but of course also the consumer. I think that transparency is important. You owe it not just to the consumer that's going to buy you, but also to the staff or the people that actually make it. Because I think that as creative people, we are just one grain of the entire sand. And I think to make sure, I definitely feel that at least I'm happy with a group of people that are on board, that are of course of the younger generation, and I think that constantly when I interact with a younger consumer, they definitely want to have that knowledge.
How does a consumer know that they're not being, it's just not a marketing gimmick? Because everyone is sort of using these words, transparency, circularity, whatever these words are right now. How is it for a consumer that you really know, okay, this brand is being transparent?
I think, of course, it's over a due period of time when the truth can actually reveal itself. But I also feel that, when you feel honesty continuously over a period of time, you do feel that the brand has a real voice.
Yeah.
I mean,
sorry, I didn't want to disrupt you at all. But I think with these new indexes and, where there is some sort of body that monitors your sustainability charts, and to make that, just like in other industries, they have, governments put in place a certain, list or a checklist that all of these norms need to be filled in. So I think by enforcing some amount of I know that it's not because everything comes with a cost and a smaller company and a
So
smaller
these
label.
technologies, like these apps and things, are very
Yeah.
expensive, right?
Yeah,
So how does
yeah.
that work for smaller brands like you to invest in all
You know,
of these
I think
things?
what Amit said was with smaller brands reaching to their own communities digitally and showing the work and the processes that they follow and allowing for that information even because everyone you can access digitally now, even your creators, even certain weavers or embroidery karkhanas and people. They're all small entrepreneurs of their own, and they've also now, they also have access to their own digital platforms. So people can directly connect with them. If you're not only, so for example, when you work on certain collaborations, like I said, on our social media, sometimes we even tag the creator. So people can also see and also like reach out to them to create if they want to reach out to them personally or as a company or want to work with them, it allows them that freedom. And through just communication, I think if you're a small brand, small company, you can just communicate through your digital platforms and just let them know who you're working with, how you work, show them your factories, show them, I mean, I saw many with photos of, so people know that they can access you, they can just walk in, just to allow that communication between, I feel.
So social media has been a real
It's
important
a
tool
real,
for transparency.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
And people ask as well, they DM you.
Yeah.
They're very quick to.
And how is the industry working together on issues like this in India?
Well, I feel in India we're always, we're a step back, but I think COVID has really given us this impetus. I think publications, I see the biggest change when publications, instead of just posting stars and Bollywood stars, and it was earlier just directed. So I think a little bit of pressure has come off a lot of people. And as Anju mentioned, that we've all sort of taken a step back. We've all said, is it worth it? What's important? What is it that drives us in this? And I think if you don't get the joy, you can't give joy.
True.
And ultimately, there has to be a spiritual journey in this for everyone. And it is about what makes you feel happy. And I think people, those that have given 30 years and have set the bar so high for us at a time where it was only about commerce. At a time like that, when they stepped into and pushed an idea that was contrary to what fashion should have been, has given rise to future generations of people wanting to do that can sustain. If it can sustain 30 years, it can sustain 100 years. It can sustain as long as, time can be.
I think, as you said, during COVID, everyone realized, because the textile industry is the second largest employer in India, how vital it was. And in a way, you're all in a very privileged position, being independent small brands. But what about the Made in India label internationally? Because we're known for high quality work, but not at great prices. And how do we drive that? I mean, if you think of Made in Italy and the way people think of that, Made in India is far behind that.
Yes.
And we need that transparency even on international labels. Is there any way we can do anything about that, do you think?
I overall feel it's a lot to do with the empowering of the people that make it happen.
Yeah.
I feel that, as a conscious choice, we don't retail anything internationally, even if it's a bulk purchase at a lower price than what we would do here. So I think that and definitely if anyone, of course, ever raises the question that, but labor in this country is cheap. It's not cheap. It's not cheap because it's beautiful. So, it's not cheap because it gives you the value that you'd probably get from a Made in Italy brand. So I feel that as as creative individuals or people on the forefront, we also need to assume the responsibility of being spokespeople for our crafts and tell them that, okay, it's not just about the fact that we are probably much more in number and that's why it should give you the leeway of making us cheaper, you know.
I feel, one needs to raise the consciousness about, the human value versus material value. So internationally, I think Rakesh is also there in, exporting and doing the international business. So if we explain them the work, the hours, the meticulousness required, the precision required to do all these kind of things, they will respect that. And then Made in India should have that respect. So this, imbalance between the price and the human value and the emotional value. So all these things needs to be little bit more, like we need to make people more conscious about it, more aware about it.
Post-COVID, there's a lot of changes that have happened internationally as well.
Yeah.
A lot of huge brands.
Have you
mega
seen?
brands.
Have you seen that you've been getting more interest because you're so craft and contemporary and seasonless? Have
Yes.
you
It
seen
is-
that your clothes now have a more global appeal
I mean,
because of
everybody is being
its
put
appeal?
to standards, and everybody is being questioned no matter how big you are and how powerful you are. So ultimately, and also the digital world has allowed for this communication and this voice to travel more easily, and people are no longer reliant on wholesale businesses at trade fairs or even fashion weeks or at retail stores. You can exist and do really well simply by having a reach internationally,
consumer has
direct
really grown.
consumer.
Yeah.
And these are conscious people around the world, and I think publications are also doing it has to be done collectively. It can't be just, definitely as creators, first of all, I think to be proud of your own heritage and to be proud of who you are and know that a lot of us don't even need to venture internationally to survive and sustain and to do really well. That is one.
You've always done all the international shows, correct? You've
I
done
have done
Paris.
a few.
Yeah.
I did Trenoy a couple of times, twice, and then the second time COVID happened, and then I've done Who's Next. But what's really wonderful is the reason I explored and I continue to want to explore the international market is to see my design aesthetic, because I feel that there's a market for what I do internationally, world over. It is not confined to a continent or a people. It's hugely inspired by India and its crafts. But because of my own personal journeys and my own aesthetic, it is an antithesis in some ways of the vibrancy of colors and everything that I do. I mean, I'm totally the opposite of that, in my work. It's devoid of any. It's more serene. It's more, because to me that is what I see when I engage with, when I've interacted with people in India, because my dad was in the army, so we were traveling everywhere, and my mom's an artist, so she would just sit and start sketching people in remote places, because my dad was in the infantry, so all border areas. So we'd actually traveled with him and lived in those areas, and we'd just go and some tribal. We've seen so many tribes in Arunachal and and Nagaland and all of these places, and we'd go there and you just stop them in the middle of their chores and you'll say, can we just paint you? And they won't even understand, but they can just guess that you want to because you have a sketch pad in your hand. And we'd look at, and my mom would just start sketching them, and they were completely in harmony with themselves. There was absolutely no need for them to run or worry, I'm in the middle of some task or nothing. They just sit there. And when I looked at they're wearing fully vibrant clothes, costumes, everything. But for me, what I saw was this incredible peace and serenity in them. They were at peace with their environment. And it was this that I wanted to communicate. And of course, all their weathered faces, their hands and everything. And I was like, okay, how do I show that? You know, so it's about these intricacies in my pleats and the hand kanta and, you know, the textures and the block prints. And there's a lot of little minute details, but it's so minute that you have to see it really up close. To get to know somebody, you have to really go deep within and have a interaction. So it's about this aesthetic, finding a voice and an audience internationally. And I think that so many brands from India have this, you know, future and the past and this coming together of it. And I think why should anything be limited in any way? You know, fashion's about celebration, really about the human spirit. So, and in times like COVID, I think we do come together, and I think we all need to, governments, we need to push governments, we need to push our ministries, we need to, you know, journalists, designers, and people in the craft sectors, in the weaving sectors, need to also push for change and to really drive home this point that made in India and handcrafted deserves a price and a value to it.
Absolutely.
I think the passion you all speak about, your crafts and the people you work with, tells us how very transparent all your brands really are. I wanted to open this up to the audience, but I'm going to put two people on the spot, and they probably know who they are already. We have one international brand with us. They are from SMR Days. So this question on India and how it's being seen international. Gautam, I know you're the co-founder of SMR Days. Could you just tell us a little bit?
I think the beauty of Made in India is that India has always been, in its true sense, inclusive, first of all people, because a woman wearing a sari could be of any age, any size. The fabrics and the woven materials that you get here in India are always sustainable because historically they were made, you know, locally, and there wasn't the need to transport them across from one country to another, one state to another. The workmanship that came from each and every part of the country was always used as a proud representation of where it came from, and therefore it lived for generations, like you've all pointed out. So I think India has had sustainability and transparency at its root from the very beginning, which has never been appreciated. And we, as a very small brand today, is our endeavor to bring this in a very modern resort wear moment for men, because again, I feel Indian craft has always been used on lehengas and sherwanis, and it's been beautifully used at Indian weddings, but why not on a beach holiday? You can wear a beautiful bandhani shirt and go out to the bar, or a beautiful kantha bandh gala for a summer wedding, and that's what we've tried to do, is take all of this beauty and bring it to the modern world. Absolutely, and more so because it goes back to how transparent brands are being, or designers are trying to be, to show that I would not want to pay a karigar 3,000 rupees because they will accept it for a month. I'd rather give them a better standard of, you know, work. And you don't want 12 women sitting under a light bulb and working without fans, without ventilations. You want to support people having a decent life, and that's not a lot to ask for. And if that comes at a price, people will pay for it, you know. So I just think it's making them aware of the reality and teaching them the value of what they're getting.
We have with us also Shafali, the editor-in-chief of Voice of Fashion. A lot of the designers brought up the role of media and journalism in transparency. And how media is, in fact, now focusing more on craft and transparency. What do you see as the role of media?
I have a few points of disagreement. First with Gautam, because he just spoke before me. India has not been, you know, craft have been beautiful. They have been village and artisan oriented. There is a rurality. But the moment commerce entered, and commerce entered before British, with British, after the British, in the development phase, post-Nehruvian phase, every time the Indian artisan has been exploited. There has been child labor, there has been less than sufficient wages, the wage board has not been corrected enough. So sustainability, when we say craft is beautiful and India has been sustainable, we are looking at its beautiful traditions and the exemplary and the dexterity of craft. But how these function and how they come together in a commercial establishment or for exports or for sale, I do think through my reporting work that the artisan has been very, very unfairly dealt with. And so I have not found traditional clusters necessarily sustainable when they come in contact with commerce. So it's just an observation from, my point of...
I think, as I said, we're kind of a privileged set here, because being small batch, independent,
now,
fashion.
All of them sitting here actually to me represent something that has an inflection point in the way we look at when we report on fashion. But coming back to your question, is media really worried about transparency? No. Because the collaborative marketing and promotional work that you and us do together, whether it comes as a press release from you, you all write to us about materials, sometimes about processes, but there's not even a hashtag which says, we are transparent. Transparency is a scientific, legal initiative. There is a sustainable charter by the United Nations. It has 17 development goals. It's spelled out. There are other sustainable charters that exist internationally. Aditya Birla Fashion Retail Limited, for instance, from India, was chosen as compliant to all of them. That means any of your enterprises can be compliant and it can be judged and seen. It's not for a media person to decide. But I think both your side and ours could do better to say this is transparent and what is transparency. So when PR people engage us with ideas or promotions or materials or glamour, they could add that bit about transparency is about supply chains. That is what is transparency. It's not even about design. I do not need to know how Urvashi Kaur makes her embroidery or how, Rakesh Taco reinterprets ikat, and all of you do exemplary work. But are you compliant? Is there a supply chain problem? Did you pay well on time? What is waste and water management? What is the wage board issue? Have you rehired people who were thrown out during this? That's transparency. So we do not know enough about these things, and I have to say the media has to take responsibility for not getting enough on this case. I'm culpable in that sense.
But again, I think, coming from, in your formative years when you're studying fashion, for example, in schools and colleges, you're not taught about that. You're not made aware of it. It wasn't something that was in a part of our conversations when we began our journeys. And I think it's really important that these be introduced as adapted into the system. And also if everybody, let's say fashion weeks, fashion bodies or FDCI, or, start to say, okay, depending on what are the, how complicated it is or how easy it is, but like Shefali said, that, to have these indexes, to have these charters, to have these compliances, somebody has to want to enforce it so that people have no alternative but to do that if they want to be a part of certain bigger fashion events or...
Shouldn't individual companies just start doing it themselves to start with?
Of course, they are. I think the conversations have started. In fact,
the conversations have indeed started.
Yeah. We are all looking at the ones that have made progress, and that was part of something that I and my label has been endeavoring to do. Not just that, but I had a conversation with Shefali a bit earlier. How do we talk about sustainable packaging? Packaging, even the problem of packaging in itself. How do we start to make a bigger impact, a bigger difference? How do we start to bring in that much change? So, as you said, that we're transparent. We're in terms of ticking those compliances, we're not, because ourselves unaware of what those compliances are. But we are reading about it. We are.
I don't know if any of you read BOF's recent report, Sustainability Gap.
Yeah,
which
yeah.
Shafali's read. And they showed that most companies just.
Yeah,
it was not even 50%. I mean, it was just scary.
Yeah.
Where most companies stood in the transparency index.
Yeah.
Also, if I may, last to last year at the Copenhagen Fashion Summit, Nina Smith, who works with Goodview International from an India point of view, could point out so many invisible supply chains in India, all working, all doing Mukesh, hazar kinds of embroideries. What is an invisible supply chain? So something is sourced out to an artisanal cluster, he or she further sources it out. Yeah. When it goes further, we do not know their faces, names, we don't know what they are paid, we don't know if there are children involved in it.
Yeah.
So they are invisible from all points of view, and that's how a lot of work gets done. हमें 500 pieces चाहिए in 15 days. How does it get done? There's a lot of invisibility there. That's a part of the lack of transparency. And some of the top brands she could point out are making in India, both Indian and international brands, through these invisible chains.
Yeah. But it's about a call that we need to take. It's about, I remember Anthropology had selected a silhouette, a tent dress of mine, which is all hand-done kanta pleats, and it was in a khadi. And they wanted me to produce 3,000 of those dresses, and each tent dress has more than 15 meters of fabric. My math is bad, clearly. So it came to about some 36,000 meters that I needed, and they wanted me to produce it in 2 months. I was like, I mean, where are you even? So they're willing to pay the price, let me tell you. They were willing to pay the price, but they somehow think that this fabric is woven ready. I mean, even if I put all the weavers, I would not be able to produce it. So, the pressure of commerce, so it is really the responsibility of each individual brand to decide, do I
The important thing is the pressure of commerce for brands that have existed for many years is a lot harder because they have to now make the switch and they have to now make the change.
Yes.
What we're doing is, as a young brand, we've been around for 4 months, building this into our grassroots. It's a pillar. We take it for granted.
Big
we don't
advantage.
have to go replacing those dollars anywhere. We start with factories that are audited. We start with suppliers who have a lot more visibility. So I think that's harder. That's why the Business to Fashion report said it's very good to present.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions from the audience to our panel, since we have them? That's great. Well, thank you all then so much for joining us. I'm going to just end by asking you the question that Wall Street Journal asked in its headline a few weeks ago. What does it take for a brand to be transparent? Maybe you can just each sum it up in a sentence before we leave.
Okay. Well, in the whole of this, conversations with us, I was always feeling that transparency is again, like, of course, being honest, and it goes from top to bottom. Like, if I am being fair to my person, and then that person is kind of doing some kind of a beautiful work, so spiritually he is in the right space, and he is not going to be not fair to the next person. And as far as the child labor you mentioned that, so that our craft is learned from the childhood times, and they are supposed to learn it from their parents. There is no school, there are no institutions to teach the craft exactly, like even NID, if they send them to the rural villages. So I feel that transparency is going to be like the next thing which is going to come in the forefront. The more we develop the craft, the more we create and give our dedicated design intervention in the rural sectors and create the smart villages rather than the smart cities. So it will all go down to the last person, and then the fair price, the fair trade, everything will become, the part of the whole thing. Like, it's a long process, yes, but I think all designers, at least all of us, are committed to that part of it, where the design intervention is a very, very important uh, need of the hour, because the techniques of the craft are there. They are also designing, but the designers are giving them the kind of design intervention which is required in the modern world. So this collaboration, then taking it further to the down the line to the next person, to the last person, and then making it sustainable. So everything together will, like, that's my utopian dream. So it will become transparent, and the smart villages all around the country. It should be. That's my effort, my side of the effort always.
So most of your work is now taking place in the villages. You don't.
Yes, of course. I mean, the weaving is done there itself, and so much of the sampling of the embroideries we do in our own studio, but it goes to the artisans there and the craftspeople. Chikankari can't be done in Delhi.
Yeah.
So all these kind of, the Iktar, Kashmiri work can't be done in, the city. The city destroys the beauty of the craft somehow, because the hustle, bustle, the expensive, cost of the living here, everything takes away they are under stress. I think
Also the working conditions.
the working conditions, the small little ghettos and living there and all that. So it's better to be, make them self-reliant and be in their home spaces,
smart
and
villages.
So
Rakesh?
Well, my journey started in the 80s with textiles, and I think it was at that time when we actually worked on an experiment project, which is the Vishwakarma textiles from India. And that was a process of working directly with the weavers and every other craft. And we took it forward by actually introducing through the catalogs, which was basically the weaver, from which village and whatever, that we actually gave significance and the more thought process to this whole exercise. So the idea was to also that for people to have the direct contact with these people. And this was earlier done. And I think that worked very well, and surprising that we still work with some of the weavers that we did work in the past 40 years is what my journey is about. And till today, Ibrahim Thakore actually still works with some of the weavers that I did many years ago.
That's sustainable.
Yeah.
Exactly, so that we've been able to sustain that
Yeah.
and build that relationship all these years.
Sujata, for me, honestly, it's a far more spiritual road. I think for me, every time going back to where I started, the reason why I started only allows me to be vulnerable and at the same time be transparent. And the minute I realize the reasons I do what I do, I realize that my entire system gets filled with care. And the minute you care for the people that actually make it happen, they realize that they need to care back, and they actually do. And I think that for me, honestly, I look at a little bit of my approach is maybe a little myopic. I look at myself as a small agent, and if I can bring about that change, it might be a little change, but if everyone has that sense of, bringing about a little bit of change, the world is already going to be a better place.
Yeah, I think we all do, at least those that are passionate about what brought them into this industry and design and fashion. And I think if each of us stay true to who we are and then have times like COVID happen where even some of us, at least I can only talk for myself and say that, you tend to follow a race without really wanting to be in that race, but something propels you and you feel that that's the only way to go till you see that there is another way that is possible. And sometimes you have to get to that really bad space to grow from it and to evolve from that space. So I think, we were not prepared for it. We were not online. We were not selling digitally. We were on some online portals. And then as a brand, something that I had been meaning to do almost 3 years before COVID happened was get my e-commerce set up, and the race of events, exhibitions, and everything, retail events, stores, and fashion weeks, everything. It was this crazy, frenetic cycle.
It's like a race.
It's like a race. You're like that mouse. Unknowingly, you're just going up and down and up and down and up and down, and you think, and it's so stressful because you're as good as what your last showing was, and then everything is just forgotten. It's just so momentary. And so I remember when I did to celebrate 10 years of the brand, I said, let's do a shoot that really shows that something that I created 10 years ago is continued, is valid and relevant, and can be. And so I brought in a stylist and I said, just pick anything from any of the 10-year collection, just mix and match and just put it together. And it just really showed that you can create timeless pieces, you can create beautiful pieces, you can work in, I think it's about communicating, and the ways to communicate will become more and more streamlined and, or enforced or compliances or whatever it may be. You will do what it takes to ensure that it is not greenwashing, and if you're committed to it, but those that have been committed to something, the consumer, maybe someone in another corner of the world isn't aware, but the ones that have been a part of your community as buyers already know that you have been very true to what you have been committing and what you have been doing, because they see that the workers, I mean, in my office 12 years ago jo the wo hi hain. I mean, I've had the same workers, not one person has left. I mean, that means you're giving them growth, you're giving them stability, you're giving them, you're nurturing them, you're giving them respect, and they're being able to further. And if you're working with, let's say, craftspeople, and if you see that their children are taking forward their craft, then you know that whoever's supporting them or whoever's working with them is providing them enough for them not to move to a call center and do something else and earn more money. So I think it is important to understand that we have the ability to support this ecosystem that can continue for generations, and we have to work harder. We have to, I mean, it's been a journey. It has been a journey to even convince retail stores to buy your collections, a khadi silhouette for 15,000 as opposed to something that is polyester with a lot of embroidery or whatever it may be. But, and then this is devoid of any embroidery and yet it's priced at the same. So it has been a journey, and those that are committed to the journey are still standing, are learning how to use, and it's tougher because we started in a non-digital era. We aren't comfortable. I mean, I'm certainly not comfortable with a camera on my face or just doing it more naturally, Instagram. But your communities, your future generations that's their platform. So we have to learn how to communicate with them. And I think whatever the platforms there may be, or whatever the platforms, we have to adapt. Adaptability and resilience, and just wanting to stay committed to what you want and finding the answers. Nobody knows all the answers, and it's just introspection, being a part of conversations, making a committed effort, and being challenged by younger labels that are that know their shit. Sorry to say, but yeah, they know how to go about it. They're younger. They're more passionate about it because they have felt the earth almost slip away. I mean, we've had the privilege of having blue skies. They haven't. So for them, it is more more of an urgency. So we have to keep pace if we want to sustain ourselves. Otherwise, they'll take over, and that's fine. If they know better and they can make a bigger change, then we must give them the space.
Well, thank you all for being a part of this.
Sorry, that was not a sentence.
I think your passion and what you were trying to say came through. But thank you all for doing this conversation. And also, all of you are for the transparency you've all shown in your own things. I think as independent, small batch, driven brands, it's sort of easy. I still think transparency is a huge issue out there for India in the larger sector, and hopefully some of the larger manufacturers can learn from you guys and be as transparent as you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.